HUS committee will come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Present.
Alderman Coder.
Here.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd. Chairman Rhodey.
Present.
5 present, you have quorum.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Chair will recognize a motion to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes, Mr. Chairman, from last meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 20th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Coder.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Procedurally, if we could, we have a sign-up sheet that I think was posted. I have a note from our clerk that we may have extra or other people that were interested in speaking today. I'm not really sure how we identify that. Madam Clerk or Mr. Clerk, is there some process that we have to provide people an opportunity now to sign up for speaking if they haven't?
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Alderman Todd.
Okay then, because my computer was messing up.
My understanding is that there is a process where they can elevate the people if they're attendees.
Okay.
But they did not sign up, so you're not necessarily required to do so.
We're not obligated to do
You're not
that.
obligated.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your.
I just put that on as a note to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Okay, is our speaker from the Federal Reserve online yet?
Yeah, I'm here. This is Chuck.
Oh, Chuck, thank you for joining us today, Charles Gascon. What we'd like to do is bring our speaker on first. It was a request of our colleague from the 20th who had was wanting some additional insight into, obviously this is going to be a difficult budget year. And of course, the St. Louis Federal Reserve is perhaps one of the most recognized and admired and respected economic forecasters. And so we're very honored to have them here in St. Louis and one of their economists with us today, Charles Gascon. Is it doctor or is it, I'm sorry, Charles, I'm sorry, Mr. Okay, my apologies. But so our colleague from the 20th that requested your presence, we've always enjoyed your presentations and thought we would go ahead and maybe you can share with us some of your thoughts about what's going to happen in the St. Louis regional economy.
Sure, sounds good. I'm going to share my screen here and then hopefully you'll be able to see some slides. Gerard also has a copy of the slides and he'll be emailing them out to everybody. So let's see here. So can you all see my screen now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Chairman Rhodey, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Sounds good. I found that there can be some delay as I click through things, so I'm going to kind of pause as I move through a few of these things and hopefully everything loads up on your end. Okay. I'm going to take a really high level view of the information that we have at this time. Obviously, things have been changing very fast and we get new information every single day. So I'll try to provide you an update kind of hopefully as we have a sense from some data actually as of last week. Um, let's see if these will advance. Okay, so I want to start here because I think this is probably the only good news to share. But I think it's really important for kind of understanding kind of where we're at overall in this downturn, and kind of what's keeping things up. And it's basically the fact that due to kind of unprecedented levels of government assistance from the federal government through unemployment insurance, through stimulus checks, through payroll protection, we've seen the largest increase in per capita incomes on record. So real disposable incomes went from 45,000, this is nationally, but similar trends in St. Louis, I expect once we see the data, went from $45,000 nationally to $51,000 in 1 month. You can see in the chart on your left here, this goes back to 1960, and I mean this spike is unprecedented. It's a 13% increase from 1 year ago. Typically during recessions, incomes fall. That's not surprising. People lose their jobs, they're out of work, they need to find other sources of income. They go on unemployment insurance, and that usually has a lower income, not necessarily an equivalent income. Due to this pandemic, we've wanted people to leave work in many cases so they can stay healthy, and offset that with just, very high amounts of government spending. So when we think about things like the unemployment rate, we have to keep in mind that a high unemployment rate in this environment is not necessarily associated with, at this point in time, is not necessarily associated with very steep drops in income. Household savings rates went up from about 7% last month to about 33% in the current month. So a lot of people are keeping cash on hand, obviously, as there's a lot of uncertainty in the outlook. When you do get to the unemployment rate, and this is the national numbers, it has reached the highest level since World War II. And there's a lot of difficulties that the Labor Department is facing in just trying to actually measure the unemployment rate. Normally, they prep the survey respondents in advance so that they understand how they're supposed to answer the survey. They do in-person meetings with the respondents to make sure they understand what's going on. In this case, they're doing everything over the phone and online. So survey response rates have dropped down, and in many estimates from the Labor Department, they think the unemployment rate could be actually about 5 percentage points higher. So it could be as high as 20% nationally, just due to kind of people not answering the questions the way that they would expect, because there's not necessarily perfect clarity as to what it means to be unemployed in the current environment. Some things that are interesting when you look into the data at this point is unemployment rate for women is higher than it is for men by about 2%, 2.5 percentage points, which is something that we typically haven't seen during recessions. This is a fact of kind of some of the sectors have been shut down, as well as I assume maybe household choices as to who's going to remain employed and who's not. And we know gender wage gaps exist, so those things come into play. And then there's big differences in unemployment rates by race too. So the Black unemployment rate's almost at 17% at this point, and actually trended up in the recent month as the national numbers went down. I don't have great details yet for kind of the metropolitan area and for the city, but the numbers that we do have suggest that kind of the state of Missouri and St. Louis, more generally speaking, has seen a slightly lower unemployment rate. But again, I mean, 11.5% or 11.7% unemployment is just still unprecedented. So I think even though these numbers are better than the national average, we do have to realize that they're still of historic magnitude. We'll have the numbers for the metropolitan area and the city on the 1st of July is when those numbers come out. So we're looking at a couple months lag to get kind of a true sense to what these trends look like. But I will show you some higher frequency data that kind of gives us a sense of where some of these numbers are moving. When you look at the unemployment rate, I really want to break this down by kind of what the reasons are for unemployment, because it does show how unique this downturn is. So you always have these people that are just entering the labor market, either just graduating high school or college, and they're unemployed for a period of time. That always is a piece of the unemployment rate. Those people are always there. You also have the people that voluntarily quit their jobs to move from one place to another, look for a better opportunity, and there's a period of time that they might be unemployed. And then you have this chunk of people who are re-entering the labor market. Either they stopped looking for work and then they started looking again. So those could be re-entrants, or maybe somebody dropped out of the labor force for health reasons or family reasons, and now they're entering back in. And that's going to create some unemployment as well. And then the second to last group, which is always the biggest one, which is the cyclical part, is these are the people who are laid off. That's what drives the unemployment rate most of the time, from kind of that 3.5%, 4% range up to 6%, 7%, 8%, is people are laid off from their work permanently, and they need to find a new job and a new match. And then this last part, and I realize that it's really difficult to see the spike, and I'll zoom in on a second. These are people who are on temporary layoff from their employer. So maybe they're still receiving health insurance benefits from their employer, but they're not at work. They've been told that they're not supposed to come in right now, but they haven't lost their job, and they're unemployed. That's what's pushing this unemployment rate up at this time, and it's a really abrupt spike. And just to kind of zoom in on the last year, this is what the picture looks like. So I think a bright spot to look at it would say, if these people are still attached to their employer and are truly on temporary layoff, you would expect that as this pandemic subsides, they should go back directly to those same employers and should be able to return to work. We do see that in some cases. Manufacturing firms that were temporarily shut down brought workers back. Restaurants, retail establishments did some of those same things. But we do know that I think some of these people that are in this red group are going to ultimately move into the job leaver group as their firms are maybe not able to make it. So I think the real $1 million question at this point, and what I'm going to be looking at over the next couple of months, is how does this composition change? Does it change to be more people in permanently layoff, or does this temporary layoff continue to stay there and they think they're going back to their work? Turning to kind of some more St. Louis specific data, these are the job loss numbers that we're looking at, and job gains that we've seen over the last couple of months. So the numbers for March showed kind of a slight contraction in employment. April was where there was an abrupt decline, about 10-12% drop in employment. And just to put that in perspective, in 2008, when the recession hit, employment dropped about 6%, and that took about 1.5 years. So this is, twice that decline in 1 month, which what took 1.5 years before. The national numbers for May showed some gains in employment from the household survey. The Missouri numbers showed a decline. However, when you look at the survey of businesses, which is this next chart, they should match up really closely over time. The numbers look a little bit better, actually. So we have the survey of businesses for the metropolitan area, and they show about a 1.5% increase in employment between April and May. So there's this gap going on right now between what households are telling us in these surveys as to their status of employment if they're coming back to their work versus what employers are reporting on their payroll reports. Generally speaking, the payroll data tends to be more accurate over time, but it does take some time for these two things to get reconciled. But it does seem like at this point, we've seen a bit of a recovery into May from the employment side of things. And I'm going to just touch on kind of what sectors that's coming from and some of the reasons why I'm concerned that it's maybe not as sustainable as we might like to see. So these are the job losses by sector. The region lost about 150,000 jobs in the month of April. About 70,000 of them were in the leisure and hospitality sector. 14,000 were in retail. Education and health sector, there were about 10,000 layoffs. I know there's been a lot of headlines from the hospital systems around the region that have had to lay off workers because they haven't had the funds or customers coming in for elective surgeries. So the declines were widespread. Every single sector in the economy lost jobs, but there were a few places that they really, took the hardest hit. The numbers for May, which showed that slight improvement, it's primarily leisure and hospitality, this is going to be restaurants. So restaurants and other hospitality establishments, they added 19,000 employees. But when you add this whole thing up, the whole entire metropolitan area only added 17,000 employees. So there is underlying weakness in many sectors of the economy. For example, manufacturers are still shedding workers, wholesalers are still shedding workers. And obviously in many governments are shedding employees as well. So while the kind of headline numbers, I think, showed some rebound in activity, it is fairly concentrated in the leisure and hospitality sector and these restaurants reopening back up. So I'd like to see this more broad-based before we actually think that we're on a strong pace to recovery. And I think this chart here, I'll take a second to explain what it's showing, is from the Census Bureau, which is doing a survey of small businesses. And what they ask is in the last week, how has your operating revenues changed, not including assistance or loans? And what I'm showing is the net share of respondents that said things were going up or down. So this number has to be positive for more businesses to be saying that their revenues are increasing than decreasing. So nationally and in the St. Louis area, back in the beginning of May, about 63% of businesses said that their revenues had declined from one week to the next. It's improved, but now it's still a quarter of businesses are reporting that their revenues, on net, a quarter of businesses are reporting their revenues are lower than they were the prior week. So I think what's happening as this economy reopens is that you have more businesses opening, or businesses are opening at a faster rate than maybe customers are coming back. So there's more competition in the marketplace, and those dollars that people have are getting spread over more businesses. And as a result of that, these businesses are seeing still kind of slow bleed on their revenues, even as the economy starts to open back up. And I'll kind of put some numbers behind what this reopening looks like here in one more slide. I just want to mention the St. Louis Fed has been doing surveys probably every other month now. There's a link to the entire report at the bottom of this slide. But just some highlights from our survey. We see a lot of reports of supply chain challenges still persisting. Businesses can't get the supplies that they need to reopen, and they're paying a higher cost for those things. Financial distress since April has improved. I think people that were looking for PPP money were really struggling earlier on in the month. That second wave of funding coming in has helped out a lot of businesses, and they feel like they have a longer pipeline. But again, going back to that last chart, at this point, a lot of households and a lot of businesses are relying on government assistance to stay afloat. And there's a lot of concern that they're not going to be able to collect payment from their customers in the coming months because of these challenges with slow demand. Turning to some high frequency data, and this is some research that came out of our colleagues at the Dallas Fed. They took a whole bunch of different indicators that you can use to track how much people are moving around. So I think a lot of people have probably seen, cell phone information being used from Google Analytics to see how many people are moving around. There's a lot of different indicators that are out there. And what the Dallas Fed did was they took as many of them as they possibly could, and they came up with this index to say, how much are people leaving their houses, in short. And I think one thing to note, and I see this in many of the states that we look across, is things trended upward and people started moving out of their houses again and moving around kind of in early April. And you don't see much of a change as kind of shutdown policies changed either. So it's not like we see an abrupt change in mid-May or in even early June as we know businesses started to reopen. This is a pretty straight line trend with kind of a weekly fluctuation to it as people move around more on the weekends. but mobility is still about 40% below kind of where it normally was at in kind of January, February period of time. And so we're still looking at many months at the current trend before things kind of get back to normal with people just moving around and going out as normal. There's a database from Homebase, which is a payroll processing company, and they report daily the number of employees that their customers have on payrolls. And this is found that we found this to be a fairly good predictor of what job growth is going to be looking like over the coming months as we get those official employment statistics in. You see kind of the dip around Memorial Day there. That's what that drop is in late May. But we've seen, again, kind of a steady recovery in employment that started in kind of the middle of April. But what's interesting here is and it's a little difficult to see, but if you think back, the last chart I showed you, mobility is down about 40%. This chart says that employment at these firms is only down about 20%. So again, the pace of reopening of many businesses is still, and pace of rehiring is still much faster than people are really comfortable getting out. And so I think that's where we have to worry that there's going to be some challenges in the months ahead as we move forward. And again, you see the same thing when we looked at our survey. We asked people, what's the factors restraining your ability to operate at pre-crisis levels? We had a lot of headlines that have been showing up that says this high unemployment insurance is making it difficult to bring back workers, and that's a restraint. So we included that in the survey. It showed up about in 18% of answers. Access to capital, social distancing restrictions were difficult. Those were some of the things that keep showing up. But ultimately, at the end of the day, about 60% of businesses are just saying, we just don't have the demand right now to operate at a higher level. So we're going to continue to ask this question and see kind of how this changes. Hopefully the lack of demand starts to come down as people feel more comfortable. Hopefully COVID cases drop.
On the HUD, in the HUD committee.
Yep.
And it is on.
It sounds like we have a muting problem. Could somebody from SLPC mute Alderman Todd's speaker? Go ahead, Mr. Kesson.
Okay, so I think the main point is this is something we're going to be looking at really closely, but as of right now, this is still a demand issue. I think there are some challenges on the supply side, but for the most part, this is really a question of how to, households at this point just don't feel comfortable to go back into businesses. For the outlook, and I think this is kind of interesting to me as I move to the kind of professional forecasters outlook for the economy as well. So we asked businesses, and this is about across our entire district, but about 50% of this is coming from the St. Louis area. We asked, when do you expect the demand for your products and services to, and the gold line is begin to pick up, and then the blue line is return to pre-crisis levels. And the way that I've done this is it's just the cumulative share of respondents. So you kind of add up each of the bins over time. So take the gold 60% here. What that's telling us is that 60% of businesses, their demands never slow down, already picked up, or they expect it to pick up in less than 3 months. And if you get up to 9 months, you're about 3/4 of businesses expect that their demand to have picked up in less than 9 months. And then similarly on the dark blue line, 60% of businesses expect that within 9 months, they'll be operating back at pre-crisis levels. So when you start to think about these numbers and kind of reflect back on that unemployment rate chart, what that does suggest, at least at this point from the business standpoint, as they look in isolation, is that they do expect to be reopening fairly quickly in the next couple of months, bringing back workers, and that should lead to a relatively strong recovery. Census Bureau asked similar questions. Excuse me, I need to drink water here. The Census Bureau is asking similar questions in their surveys. They're getting pretty similar results at this point. So a lot of businesses are planning on ramping back up activity and getting back to a level by between now and the end of the year that they expect to be close to pre-crisis levels of activity. So I think that's optimistic. That's optimistic pace. When we look at forecasts, and these are coming from our Fed policymakers here, I think the red line is kind of the lower unemployment paths. So these are the most optimistic of forecasters. And these are for the US economy. They're expecting the unemployment rate by the end of the year to get down to 7%. So that's kind of the fast pace of recovery. And then by 2021, by the end of 2021, you'd be back to something that looks like a relatively normal unemployment rate. So that, I think the picture that I have in mind is that red area and the unemployment rate chart really just drops back down. People go back to their existing employers. There are some challenges in doing so. But over time, in a relatively short period of time, we get back to something that looks fairly normal. But then there are many people on the committee that see a pretty sharp transition of these people in the temporary space moving into full-time unemployment, and that's going to take a longer time to recover. And these are baselines kind of assuming that there is not another national shutdown of the economy, so to speak. So this is assuming kind of we have regional flare-ups that are addressed, but there isn't any widespread national shutdown in the economy. So that puts kind of a baseline path at kind of 2 to 3 year recovery back to what we would see as kind of a normal level of unemployment, with kind of a strong contraction in overall output in the second quarter. The third quarter, probably a bit mixed, but start to see some rebound, and definitely much faster than what we see in 2000 and after 2008 and 2009 recovery. But I think there's a lot of risk and uncertainty in the outlook at this time, given that at 2021 forecasts from policymakers, we're spending a lot of time thinking about this range from 12% to 4.5%. I mean, that's a very, very wide band. So I think we have to realize that these are still uncertain times, and many businesses and many households are relying heavily on government assistance to keep the economy at the pace that it is right now. And as things move forward and the economy moves back to a normal pace, that's going to really be when we can see what kind of position households and businesses are truly going to be in. So, and I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions.
Unmute. Forgive me, I'm sorry, I muted myself, so I wasn't making noise. I have just a couple of questions to start off, and then we'll go through the committee. I think what primarily, the primary interest of our colleague from the 20th, when we began talking about having you today, was the impact that the economy has on the budget. I know that our current president here in St. Louis, president of the Fed, has shown a lot of interest in supporting local economies. Have you all helped develop any economic models for local governments as far as projecting our revenue? Currently, I think having talked to our budget director, Mr. Payne, they use he just simply extrapolates and takes a look at a couple things, but so much of our economy is tied to either retail sales or else food and beverage sales is a big component, and our earnings and payroll taxes. Has the Fed supported local governments in helping us develop econometric models that we might be able to better forecast our own revenue?
So we haven't put together specific models that local governments would use to forecast their revenue. I think in my own experience in answering questions from many of the local governments around the area, the questions relate to kind of what indicators are available, how do we adjust in the numbers that we do have, and where would we find kind of reasonable projections of kind of some of these source data. For example, where do we get forecasts for retail sales? How do national retail sales relate to trends in local retail sales? And how would we use those things to map things forward, but not necessarily straight line, forecasts for specific line items on the budget.
Okay, so there is that something you think the Fed might have an interest in helping us do, or is there resources available so that we could try to become more?
It's a great
accurate?
question. I don't have a perfect answer right now. I mean, I think we realize that all state and local governments are struggling during this time, trying to figure out what they need to do and what information they need to make decisions. And a lot of times that information is hard to come by. And our goal is always to be kind of the objective broker of that information, so that you all have what you need to make those decisions. One of the challenges that we run into once you start getting into this idea of projecting things out is it becomes more difficult to be the objective broker of information. So we want to kind of make sure that we share any up-to-date research and academic research that is relevant, any research that we've done on specific topics. For example, I did work a couple of years ago on kind of what the labor market dynamics looked like around minimum wages, and what workers were benefiting from changes in minimum wages within the city. That was some research that I did that I hope people found useful. But we always want to be careful that, we can continue to be an objective broker of information and not fall into kind of some of the policy details that puts that in jeopardy.
Fair answer. A little outside of your presentation today, and this will be my last question, I'll turn it over to other committee members. Have you seen since the, with the Trump tax changes and the raising of the standard deduction, as members of the HUD's committee concerned about housing, have we been able to translate the loss of, I presume many people are no longer deducting home interest at this point. Have we seen that translate in the reduction of home ownership, or?
I don't know. I'll
Looked into
look
that?
into that, and I'll send you an email or send it to Gerard. It's a really interesting question.
Okay. Thank you. As always, we really appreciate your time coming over here. I think it's always nice to have a big picture view of what's going on in the world. Going through, we go by seniority. Alderman Boyd, do you have any questions? Is Alderman Boyd? I don't think he's on the call with us today. Okay. Alderwoman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me say thank you for your presentation. It's one of those areas where a subjective forecast is helpful, but in the current circumstances that we are in, we do know that we have to be extremely cautious because we don't have a lot of control as we would normally have in this economy at this point. We know that just the last week, based on human behavior and how this health epidemic is moving, all of your numbers could change drastically in 30 days. But if we could at least understand that if there was a calming and a baseline, that what you have projected to us, we can actually work with. And I appreciate the question on the real property. Real property is normally the last to be harmed in these situations. And so hopefully, when you do look at this closer on real property, we'll have something good to talk about. But again, thank you very, very much for your presentation. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard is, sorry, I thought I guess she is not currently present. Alderman Kotar, any questions? I know Alderman Kotar was on earlier. Okay. Alderwoman Spencer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Charles, for coming down and presenting this today. I find some hope in that St. Louis and Missouri unemployment seems to be significantly lower than our national average, which is a good indicator. But certainly some of the alarming stats you brought to light with unemployment for women and people of color. As the chair pointed out, I'm very interested in tracking St. Louis's budget with the more national guidance and guidance from the St. Louis Fed on how we're predicting our future revenues and how we can better position ourselves moving through this pandemic. As you pointed out, it's a very uncertain future, but certainly not something we're going to get through quickly. And so just better inoculating our city and our tax base and where our revenue streams are coming from moving forward. I think to continue to have a dialogue with the St. Louis Fed, yourself and others would be very helpful as we move through this over the next 6 months to the next couple of years. So I don't exactly have any questions, although I would like to have the presentation that Gerard will be sending out later and a continued dialogue at your convenience.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for arranging, and thank you, Charles, for making time for us today.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Let's see, we have Alderman Oldenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charles, just some quick question around what's the most viable indicators? It feels like, to your point, unemployment has been hard to pin down. The stock market is doing what it does in times of economic disruption, right? Trying to sort itself out. One day it soars and it feels that, that's always been one indicator, but we know that there are other sectors of the economy that are reveling from this, right? That are in ruins. And, we've always looked to productivity, unemployment, stock market. But I appreciated that you put up like the small business, how small businesses are operating. I feel like that's a pretty solid benchmark and where the operating leverage is with small businesses going forward. Do you think that's probably the most important metric? I mean, because we've always looked to unemployment and, of course, how the stock market reacts. And I don't know what some other indicators are in kind of a COVID impacted economy.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So one of the things that we found when we did our survey back in April was that there was a really huge, I don't even know how to describe it, astronomically huge gap between the outlook and economic conditions of small businesses versus larger businesses that had things like existing banking relationships, advisors, things like that allowed them to get like PPP funds in a timely fashion, where there were other businesses, particularly in poorer communities, that didn't have access to banks, that didn't have the financial resources to actually get their own application in so that they could continue to operate their business. So I do think that the small business piece gives us a lot of really good detailed information on where a lot of households are facing and kind of where the growth is going to be and where the bankruptcies could potentially come from. So I do agree with that. I think one of the things that this pandemic has also brought to light is that we need to also think about the balance sheets of households and businesses and realize that they're very fragile. And things like just a 2-week delay in the stimulus checks caused a lot of challenges for people trying to make their bills. So while there were delayments and maybe making rent payments, they cause a lot of stress and anxiety and pressure on a lot of people. Beyond that, I mean, the economic data that we have, you get things like building permits on a regular basis. It's a pretty reliable indicator that we see kind of getting on the housing market side of things. There's more private sector information that's coming out. I mentioned a few of them here that are worth looking at, but we have to also kind of be cautious as to kind of how they're going to react. Looking at more specifically at St. Louis, I think one place that is important to keep an eye on, because it's been the buffer for the region for many years, is the healthcare sector. So part of the reason why we've seen kind of slow and steady growth over the last 10 years, and we didn't see a huge downturn in our economy, was that we've had a stable and strong healthcare sector that was adding a lot of jobs. When I talk to people about kind of normal recessions in the economy, I usually say, well, healthcare always adds jobs. We're seeing our healthcare sector lose jobs. When I talk to some of the main providers around the area, they're seeing pretty big losses. That means a reduction in services that they're going to provide. It also means potential reduction in capital spending as we move forward. And that's going to have spillovers to other sectors of the economy. So I think keeping a pulse on what's happening in the healthcare sector in particular for this region will kind of help us see where some of the differences might be with the national trends. So just to kind of, I know that's a really broad-based answer, but hopefully it touches on some things.
And I mean, just, I would love your thoughts on, not to be overly doom and gloom, but what your thoughts might be around the leveraged debt market and when we see that shoe drop.
I don't have a good sense on that, to be honest with you. I think it's on our radar and something we're monitoring, but I don't think it's something where we have a timing.
Yeah.
I think right now there's a lot of cash in the markets, so it's hard to really uncover. Just like I said with households, with all the assistance that's out there, it's really hard to truly understand where the financial distress is at this point.
Yeah. Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you, Charles.
Yep.
Okay, Alderwoman Boyd, any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Alderwoman. We have several board members that are not on the committee. If any of them would like to speak, I'm sorry, I can't see your faces, but if you, I don't guess, raise your hand, I guess is the way we do this. I don't know if anybody has their hands raised or not. I don't see any. Alderman
Todd, sorry, Chairman Rody. Alderman Todd looked like he had his hand up on his video there. If
Alderman Todd, did you have any questions? Alderman Todd, did you have? Nope, I guess not. Okay. Okay, I believe that's it. Alderman Kotar, we went through you and we didn't hear from you. Did you have any questions? Maybe he stepped away from his computer. All right, well, Charles, as always, thank you very much for coming. It's I think it's good to keep an eye on the big picture as we kind of hammer it out here in the city here. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you all for your time too. I know you have a lot on your plates and I know it's a lot of work for you. So I appreciate everything you guys are all doing for the city as well.
Dr. Hollins, did you have anything you want to wrap up with before we take up a board bill?
Real quick, I just wanted to ask Charles a real quick question. As it relates to within the region, are you seeing larger behavioral trends or changes in behavior that could impact us? Like, for example, you're starting to see new housing, new construction starts pop up in other markets, new home sales going up as people move from urban areas into suburban areas. Are we seeing citizens tend to stay closer to home where where retail sales might be closer to their house as they're not traveling into core sections of cities? Or, for example, are we seeing, while retail sales may recover, is the percentage of internet sales increasing versus brick and mortar sales, which obviously would have a negative impact on the city? Are we seeing those type of behavioral changes yet?
We're not seeing the behavioral changes. I am seeing some survey-based measures that seem to indicate that people are changing their expectations about kind of what their purchasing is going to look like, but nothing drastic. I mean, they're shifting in the ways that you would expect, and in many ways continuing. It's just kind of accelerated some of the trends that we've already seen happening, but not completely shifting those trends, if that makes any sense. Just kind of maybe pushing them up a couple of years ahead of where they wouldn't otherwise have been.
It does. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Thanks again, Dr. Hollins, for arranging that. Thank you, Charles. Really appreciate your time today. We have 4 board bills before us. We usually try to take up non-committee members first. I think we have probably a small contingent down here for board bill number 74. So we'll adjust the agenda a little bit for that. And then we'll go through Alderman Todd's bills, and then we'll take up Alderwoman Davis's bill last. So at this point, Alderwoman from the 6th, if you care to take up your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. You have before you today Board Bill 74, which is an amendment to the MLS redevelopment agreement that we passed at the board. It would authorize LCRA to begin eminent domain proceedings to acquire a parking lot that is bounded on the west by 21st, the east 20th, Pine Street to the north, and Chestnut to the south. The redeveloper has attempted many times to negotiate a fair deal with the property owner, who is a large conglomerate based out of Atlanta. The parking lot is about 220 spaces, but only a handful of people use it on a daily basis. And so we're coming here today to ask for your favorable consideration of allowing LCRA to begin exploring this as an option in order to make sure that we can move forward with the stadium project. And I do have Bill Keeling, who is representing the ownership group. If he would like to add anything, we're both available for questions if you have them.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm Bill Keeling, attorney with Thompson Coburn, representing the MLS team. As the Alderwoman said, going back more than a year, we've been attempting to negotiate with the owner of this. It's owned by a condominium, and the condominium is owned by 2 financial entities, one out of Atlanta and one out of Chicago. And on more than one occasion, we thought we had agreement. We made generous offers. The teams made generous offers, but things never get finalized. We send documents and they don't get signed, and we continue on. So anyway, we've reached a point now where we just need to be able to try to move forward with this acquisition. There's an excellent picture in STL today of the site, and you can easily see the parking lot, which is kind of a very critical location. What this bill authorizes is really amending the master redevelopment agreement. It doesn't automatically mean that condemnation is approved. We're going to have to, team is going to have to present evidence to LCRA that we've made good faith efforts to try to acquire this land. The master redevelopment agreement also requires the team to bear all costs and expense as to any and all risk associated with any possible condemnation. It's our hope we won't have to use this. To refresh your memories, there was condemnation provided for a parcel up on Olive Street in the original redevelopment plan. It turned out we didn't have to even come close to using it. A agreement that was satisfactory to everyone was reached fairly quickly. So we've acquired a whole variety of parcels without needing to go this route. I think that's a testament to the fairness of the offers that have been made. But this one, we've just reached a point where we can't wait any longer. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Before we get into questions, why don't we see if anybody else cares to speak? We had several people signed up to speak, and I don't know if they were specifically here to be available or if they had something to say to add one way or the other. We have a Melissa Powers. Is there a Melissa Powers that is available? How do we? Was Melissa Powers sent?
Mr. Chairman, this is Dave Sweeney. She's an associate at my law firm. I think there's been a miscommunication there. So.
Okay, so I think you were particularly signed up. You were signed up as well, Mr. Sweeney. Did you have?
No. Nobody wants to hear me talk.
Okay. Michael Knight, is Michael Knight speaking for or against this?
Same project that's in Alderwoman Davis's ward. That's what I'm on for. So. Different.
Okay. And Doug Rasmussen. Doug is same. Okay, so that's on the next. That's all on the next thing. All right, so we got the speakers cleared up. Why don't we go through the committee at this point and see if there's any questions on the committee? I did receive a text from Alderman Boyd earlier. I had not seen it on my phone, but he was hoping to drop in later in the meeting if possible, but he has a conflict now. Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask if the attorney for this project would give a further explanation of eminent domain, because as you know, our public has been taught to believe something that is not necessarily true. And we want to make sure that it's clear of what eminent domain allows to happen.
Yes, I'd be happy to give a quick thumbnail. There has to be found a public purpose, and in this case, it's certainly the remediation of the blight that was in the area and the economic development that will occur from this project. It does not mean that the land is taken for nothing. There is a process where condemnation commissioners are appointed, who are people skilled in valuations, and cases are put forth by both parties in front of them as to what the valuation of the property is. If the person who owns the land is not happy with the result from the condemnation commissioners, they can go to circuit court and ask for a jury trial on the valuation of the property. So it's by no means a theft of the property or just taking it for nothing. There are protections built in for the property owners.
I thank you. And I'll also add to that, usually when you get to this point, those who have held out for a very long time realize that if you get to court, you're only going to get market value, because that's what everything is based on. And they normally decide to take the great offers that they have been made, and the mediation normally works out, and we don't have to go through condemnation. So I just wanted to make sure that whoever is listening, the understanding is very clear, because we are not in the business of taking property from anyone. But most especially, we want to make sure that people do receive good value for their property. And in many instances, we far exceed in our offers for what the property is valued. So I thank you for clearing that up. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Hubbard. Okay. Alderman Kotar.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm back. I was multitasking there for a few minutes. I got a quick question for Bill, and I think this was covered, but I missed it. Who owns? I'm looking at the picture from the Post-Dispatch right now, showing all the site clearing with this big lot right in the middle. Who owns this lot? I thought you said it was somebody out of Chicago.
That is correct. Well, it's actually owned by two different parties. The owner on the record by the assessor is something called 1831 Chestnut Condominium. Now, of that condominium, there's two owners. One of them is Oak Street Real Estate Capital out of Chicago. The other is Stone Mount Financial out of Atlanta. And they jointly own this parking lot and what's generally referred to as the Anthem Complex, which is kind of everything to the east, including like a parking structure, an old parking structure they have, and what's generally considered to be the Anthem offices, but there's some few other offices in there. So we've been dealing with two different parties, and they've been trying to reach agreement between themselves as to how to deal with the potential sale of this parking lot. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do a little quick experiment and see if I can't figure out how to show everybody this. I pulled it up on my other screen. Okay, that didn't work.
No, it worked great.
Oh, can you guys?
No, it
see
did.
that?
It did.
Yeah,
it worked.
Wow. Okay, well,
that's it.
Okay. Let's see. Now I can't see my roll call sheet. Let me see if I can't find that now. Okay, now it's. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I believe I'm next if you want to just.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Alderwoman, for your patience with me. Alderwoman Spencer.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize. I had a visitor here distracting me for a few minutes in that presentation. The timeline for this, for securing this property, I don't know if the sponsor or Bill Keeling wants to answer that. Can you go over again? Just, I know there's been a lot of issues obtaining this property, but what is the timeline with regards to the eminent?
Well, regrettably, in an eminent domain process, timelines get a little fuzzy because it depends on the appointment of the condemnation commissioners by a circuit judge. And some of the circuit judges will appoint them within a couple of weeks. And those condemnation commissioners will meet very promptly and move forward. There have been other cases, like going back to the old, to the current convention hotel, where it was almost a year before a circuit judge appointed the condemnation commissioners. So it gets a little fuzzy. We're hoping that if we do have to actually go through the condemnation process, that the commissioners would be appointed within 3 months, and that we could wrap up and at least make the payment into the court to acquire the land within 6 months.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the explanation, Bill.
Okay. I have no idea what you all are seeing right now. So let's see, where's the roll call sheet? Alderman Oldenburg, any questions?
Just one, Bill, without maybe getting into too deep into the specifics of the transaction, or at least the offer, is it safe to say that 1.5 or 2 times probably the market value of the property has been offered?
I think that's in the range.
Okay, got it. I have no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Boyd. I'm guessing Alderwoman Boyd stepped away. Oh, she flickered there. There she goes. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Boyd.
Okay, I'm sorry, I had unmute. I'm like you, Chair. The only thing I wanted to piggyback on what the Alderwoman from the 19th Ward stated, people need to understand a lot of time corporations are holding these properties as hostage because they do know that the work that the city is trying to do. And so it hurts communities because they let the properties decline. So a lot of times we have to go that route, eminent domain, because people are continuously trying to hold our city hostage and not let us move on with improving the development within our communities. And that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Boyd. Are there any other questions from, looks like, I believe Alderwoman Rice is the only person, only member of the board not on committee. Or Alderman Todd or Rice, do either of you have questions regarding this?
No, I don't.
Thank you, Alderman Todd. Okay, if there's no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion on board bill number 74.
I move that we adopt Board Bill 74 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 27th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Boyd. Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Toder.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer. You're muted, Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Chairman Rhodey.
Aye.
6 aye votes.
Okay, by our vote, we have passed out of committee board bill number 74 with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you all.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it very much.
So at this point, we have Alderman Todd. Alderman Todd's actually supposed to be over at the another committee. I apologize, Alderman Todd. I didn't get your message until after we had started on the previous bill. Alderman Todd's asked to have 2 board bills heard. I think I tried to explain to you, Alderman, these are typically a little complicated. It helps to have the administration involved in these. You have 2 of them. Your preference, board bill number 37 or 39, which would you choose to begin?
I will start with 37. I already talked with Laura Costello, and this board bill 37 is maintaining LRA lots, and in the 18th ward in particular, and in North St. Louis and South St. Louis, and even some places in the Central West End and in my part of the ward, and also I've gone through the other parts because I know that area well. Those LRA lots are not maintained. A study has shown that when lots are maintained and time and manicured and time is taken to make them blend in with the community, mental health improves. So we are in a pandemic at this particular time, but on a yearly basis, especially in North St. Louis, there's a mental health pandemic due to grass growing up to weeds turning into trees. And grass growing all over the place. There have been known to have found dead bodies, different criminal activities, and different animals that spread different diseases, as well as dangerous animals in those weeds. So I came up with the idea and presented it to Laura Costello and told her that we don't expect to get the money this year, maybe even this year, but whenever we get it, then this bill will kick in, and we intend to get it from the E&A or whatever they're called, that group that housed that set priorities. Because this city, the #1 priority for me is that our constituents get served, and we have plenty of money, but the constituent services is not getting enough of it because some of it is being wasted on other things. I won't go into detail, but I will later on at the budget meeting. But the point is, this money is not in the LRA's budget at this time, but Laura agrees with this proposal to keep LRA lots cut the same as city lots are supposed to be cut by law to 6 inches. That's the highest grass, weeds, shrubbery, and foliage is supposed to be. I'm asking this honorable board to pass board bill 37 out of committee so that we can begin to focus on the needs of our constituents rather than other places that we did not campaign to focus on. Because I never campaigned on focusing on anything but my constituents, and I intend to continue as I said on this honorable board, to keep my word. Because one thing about me, I keep my word with everybody, and my constituents are important, and you are too. So I'm asking your favorable support, and let's move this city forward by making our city more beautiful and safer and healthier. Yes, what else? So what else do I need to know? Do I make a motion, or what do I do to ask it?
Well, no, what we're going to do, Alderman, is, I think it would help. I think I warned you, or I hopefully prepared you, that frequently we like to have somebody from the administration here, you know, to talk to the committee. We will open this up to the other committee members. I think it would help us all if we had the head of LRA, Costello, talk about this. And then it's my understanding we probably need to have a fiscal note attached to this to talk about expense everything, because we adopted legislation several years ago. Actually, it was Alderman French who required that we do that, with the idea that we don't pass legislation unless we know how to pay for it. So that's why I wanted to kind of prepare you. We certainly did not want to leave the opportunity of having your bill heard. But why don't we go through committee today and give several of the other committee members an opportunity to comment on this or ask any questions. Alderman Boyd is not present. Alderwoman Davis, do you have anything you'd like to add? Looks like Alderwoman Davis stepped off. Alderwoman Hubbard, or I see you on the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hold on one second. It's been a crazy morning. I've been multitasking multiple meetings, but I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Cotard, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Chairman. I think we were getting some feedback. There we go. Chairman, I think I would very much like to hear from SLDC or from LRA on this. You know, I don't know what their policy is on cutting LRA lots currently. I'd like to know what that is. I mean, I can't imagine they're not cutting them because they just simply don't want to. I suspect it's a resource issue. And this bill specifically says that funding for said activities, meaning the grass cutting, shall come from LRA's existing budget and shall not be an expansion. I guess I don't understand how they're going to be expected to do more with the same amount. I think that's going to be challenging given the number of LRA properties. I certainly understand the Alderman's intent here and share his concerns about the state of some of these LRA lots, but I very much would like to hear from LRA, you know, before moving forward with this.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderwoman Spencer, any questions of the sponsor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the sponsor here in the intent. We have several LRA properties in the 20th Ward, and many of them will go through, some of them at least, will go through an entire season without getting mowed. And it is really a horrible thing to witness, grass getting, certainly taller than me. I know that as a low bar there for some, but I mean, 5-6 foot tall grass is unbelievable. And it is scary to walk by some of these properties that are horribly overgrown. And it degrades the neighborhood. It is dangerous, and it's an untenable situation. My first question, and I think this may be a question for the sponsor or SLDC, the LRA is under St. Louis Development Corporation, and that's a standalone nonprofit. The properties that LRA owns, are those technically city-owned properties, or they own? Who is the ownership? Where does the ownership fall for these properties, technically speaking?
The LRA.
And LRA is under SLDC, correct?
SLDC.
So technically speaking, are they city-owned properties?
No, they're not. They're LRA-owned properties.
Okay, so the city has authority to take ownership of the properties under failure to pay. We can seize them, so to speak, or auction them at first for failure to pay property taxes, and then they are transferred to LRA through SLDC. How does that work, Laura?
The collector of revenue sues every year.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
No, speakers up here. Speakers up here. Yeah,
You want me to move up there?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Chris.
Incidentally, I want to apologize. I did not realize Laura Costello was on the phone, was on the call with us. So this is, she wasn't on the sign-up list. I'm sorry.
Thank you for being here today, Laura.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, the collector of revenue sues, and the sheriff forecloses on back taxes. And there are 5 sales a year they offer. At the foreclosure sale, they offer the public to come in and purchase the properties. And so anything that isn't purchased at tax sale comes into the LRA inventory. So July 21st, the tax sale we're going to have July 21st, there are about 600 properties in that sale.
Okay.
Public is welcome to come and purchase them. And again, if they don't get purchased at tax sale, they come to the LRA by sheriff's deed.
Well, hopefully in this real estate market, the majority of those will go into private ownership as in this upcoming tax sale. But, Laura, as frustrated as I often get with LRA and with, with the mowing, I have to agree with the Alderman from the 7th. We don't have currently enough resources going into LRA to properly maintain these properties. It's a confusing set of circumstances in which the city takes ownership of properties and then hands them over to a separate entity to care for them without funding that entity in a way that maintenance is reliable, consistent maintenance is feasible. But I agree entirely with the sponsor of this bill that this is a major problem. It is a major factor in inhibiting economic activity in the private market within our communities. So I would like to offer to work with the sponsor and LRA and the city in general, to try to find a solution. But certainly there's going to be a fiscal impact as we consider trying to better fund the maintenance of these properties. I don't have any further questions, just to commend the sponsor for bringing this issue forward. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Why don't we pause for just a second here? I have to apologize. I was looking through the screen and I did not see Laura Costello's name on it. She is sitting, I guess, under Zachary Wilson's login. So, Laura, are you prepared today to talk a little bit about your budget and what's going on in the limitations? This is, I know, has been an on and off type of problem with LRA maintenance issues. Are you in a position to talk about that at all today? Or
yes, and I had Charlie Hahn here also, who can, if any questions come up specifically about the budget. But I called Alderman Jesse Todd on Monday, and we talked about this. And I explained to him that we don't We don't get any general revenue from the city of St. Louis. That we rely, the LRA relies on the sale of our properties, and you know, fees and the sale of our property and borrowing and et cetera. And that as far as the grass cutting goes, that we give city forestry about $225,000 a year to cut. And that's just a drop in the bucket for what they do for us. That doesn't even take care of it. But and they cut by ward. They'll take 3 wards in different parts of the city and they'll do rotations. And so we get 4 or 5 cuts a year. And you know, that it all comes down to money. And so the alderman said he'd like to help me find some more money. So as far as budget, Charlie, yeah, you're up here. Joe, did you have any specific questions about the budget? Charlie Hahn is here.
Sure. I guess, you know, if we could kind of begin quantifying it, if you're saying you have currently 225,000, do we have an idea of what that would take to, I don't know what the rotation should be. Let's see if it's the growth cycle, I guess, is almost 6 months, wouldn't it be? So, you know, if you cut it every 3 weeks or 4 weeks, that would require.
We issued a request for bids for the grass cutting, and the other bids that we received, this was probably about 3 years ago. The other bids we received were you know, 1.8 million a year, 1.6 million a year. And those would be regular cuts, you know, so on 11,000 properties.
Okay, so in other words, we have about almost, you know, what, $1.4 million shortfall on the low end, so we'd have to come up with an extra 1.4 million.
That's on the grass cutting. Yeah. I believe the alderman and everyone would like to see all of our buildings boarded up, first floor and second floor. The largest part of our budget is keeping all those buildings boarded up. So that's just for grass cutting.
Do you? I should probably be a little more formal. Ms. Costello, do you have like it's a little hard when you've known somebody since since you're in your teens, I guess. Do you have information like on your budget that you could share with us, an idea of what you're spending on these things, how much revenue you're making from your building sales and so forth?
Yes. Charlie.
This is Charlie Hahn, Mr. Chairman. The current year, FY20, we only had, we're only projecting, the year isn't quite over yet, but we're projecting 450,000 in sales and a 95,000 in option income. So we're, you know, maybe 550,000. And of that, we have insurance costs, we have title costs, we have appraisal costs, and we have maintenance costs. And we're projecting our maintenance cost out of that to be 300,000. And Laura mentioned that we pay forestry. Well, the forestry payment's part of that 300,000. So that leaves us 75,000 to do other LRA maintenance. The forestry doesn't bill us other than the 225, but they already spend $2 million. They spend $2 million of city resources to cut our lots, and usually that's 3, 4, 5 times a cutting season. They will not cut all lots if under certain conditions,
if they have buildings on them that are dangerous, which every single building we have,
so
2,700.
if there are emergency cuts, like the Alderwoman suggested, then that's what our maintenance crew would do, those emergency cuts. But there's a long backlog for that activity too. I don't know what the number is to cut these on a regular basis. It might be several $1 million. Forestry maintains, they spend $2 million a year, and that's probably inadequate.
So, and we're talking about an inventory of what, about 11,000 pieces of property, is that right?
11,109 as of this morning.
So if you cut those 6 times years, that's 66,000 cuts. And, you know, I don't know what the appropriate number is, but, you know, at $10 a cut, that's 660,000. You said you got bids for 1 point. Do we have any idea of what it would take to, you know, I mean, what the gap is? It sounds like we're kind of doing it, but we're only doing it maybe 3/4 of the way or something, or is that something we need to get forestry involved in? Is the problem properties the ones that have vacant buildings on them that are in, you know, is there a way that we can quantify this so we get an idea of what we would really need additionally to kind of take it up to a higher standard?
Yes, we could. Like Charlie said, forestry, even though we pay them $225,000, we also buy equipment for them every year. And but forestry maintains that cut regularly for all of our properties would be $2 million.
Now, if they cut it 3 times a year, certainly it isn't going to be 6 feet tall. You know, that would take care of you know, that issue. What we need to do is double up on the properties they won't cut, or triple up on that.
Yeah.
And that would take care of something like the Alderwoman's concern.
Which is about 2,800 properties up on the way.
So by your reckoning, about 2,800 properties have a building on it in such poor condition that forestry will not cut them.
Yes.
And then have we gone through the process of thinking about, of those 2,800 properties, which of those are salvageable that we might want to keep, or which of those
Yes.
you on a demo list?
Yes, we assess them all. And we have several hundred still on the demolition list. We've taken down, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been taking down a lot of dangerous buildings. But yes, we assess them. We assess them for feature properties, for demolition, and now we're assessing for Proposition NS.
Okay, so when do you think you can kind of have a strategy or a plan of action with a price tag that you could bring back to us?
A price tag for the cutting, for the demolition, for the board?
Well, I guess I'd just like to see the, you know, the thought process that you're using, where you have 11,000 properties, and those, what did you say, roughly 8,000 of them are fine and forestry is taking care of them, but the other 2,800 or 3,000 are problems. Of those 3,000, we have X number that we're planning on demolishing and X number that we're hoping to keep. And, you know, then we can start getting an idea of, you know, where the real problem is, and, you know, what the cost would be to solve that problem, or what the solution to that problem is.
Yes, we can do that.
Okay. Alderman Todd, I think I warned you, these are not the type of things that we usually pass in the, you know, in the first hearing. What I'd like to do is provide SLDC or LRA the opportunity to go ahead and kind of go through that process so that we know what we're dealing with. And that would be then something that we could either hand off to the, you know, to the Ways and Means Committee for the next budget, or then we can go ahead and begin assessing this, I think, in a more logical way. As I asked this, Laura, I'm sorry, the young woman who works in, don't we have like a vacant property initiative? I believe her name is Laura.
Oregon.
Yeah, is she involved in this at all? Will she be working with you or?
Yeah, she works with us on all kinds of things, so she will be.
Okay, so what I'd like to maybe do is ask that we, you work with her and kind of come in with a plan of action if you had an ideal, if money wasn't a problem, so we at least know what the dollar value of this is, and then we can begin quantifying it and sharing it with other board members and so forth.
Sure.
Why don't I continue to go through the committee here? I'm going to go ahead and start back over. I didn't realize you were here. Alderwoman Davis, now that we know that we have Laura with Ms. Costello with us. Do you have any additional questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I wanted to ask a question because I pay attention when I travel, and every urban city has a problem with vacant lots and vacant buildings. But what I noticed the strategy in a lot of cities, and most especially Kansas City and Chicago, they have developed a way to treat their vacant lots and where the grass doesn't grow, but yet every year, every spring, these little cute flowers pop up. They never grow more than like an inch or two, but they're beautiful. Some are multicolor. I think they actually have a plan because in certain areas it's all yellow, it's all pink, some are multicolor, and that reduces the cost of maintaining those lots. Have we ever looked at anything like that?
We talk with the Kansas City Land Bank regularly. I've not heard of that one. I mean, I know they only have a couple hundred properties, but we talk with other land banks, Alderwoman, and we get good ideas, and they get good ideas from us. So we'll give them a call.
Because Chicago has a lot, and it looks good. I mean, I'd rather have a vacant lot that didn't have grass growing every day, but had these nice flowers because it would beautify the neighborhoods, and it would sure save us a lot of money. There has to be another way than just letting the grass grow.
Right.
That was all I wanted to propose. Thank you so much.
Alderwoman Hubbard, did you have any questions now that we know that Ms. Costello is with us? I can see
no
you.
Questions. No questions.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Alderman Kotar, did you have any questions now that we know Ms. Costello is with us?
Nothing further, Chair.
Alderwoman Spencer, you're the ones who pointed out that Ms. Costello is here. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I spoke earlier on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Oldenburg?
No, I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman Boyd?
I don't have a question. I just have a comment because, and Laura probably could help me, because we've been working close with SLDC, and I have learned that the city is not giving SLDC any dollars in regards to the cutting of lots and things. And so SLDC is giving us money toward that. But I also work close with them because everybody has the struggle of the lots and the vacant properties. And Laura, maybe you can help me. Over there by Northwest High School, it's a lot, and we had a lot of demos. And so I know, Laura, again, they are looking to do something with that lot, pretty much to what Alderwoman Davis said. And if they killed all the grass, and then they were looking for something else to come back where it wouldn't have to be maintained. And
right.
So what is that, Laura?
That's going to remain permanent green space, as opposed to being built upon or whatever. But yeah, they're putting in amended soils and what exactly the planting is, I don't know. I can find out. but those
Now,
will remain green.
now I do know Lord Gann said it'd be like wild flowers and grass and things of that sort. And so what I'm trying to do is get what our sanitation committee to work with MSD and Operation Brightside for people on blocks to adopt these lots to do that. And so that would kind of assist them at forestry where they wouldn't have to maintain those properties. Right. And so I know, and probably all the people on the call knows, that LRA did not get into this business. This is what was not what the original design was. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to assist forestry and LRA, so at least we can have some of those lots and properties that are vacant and on these blocks for the residents to kind of take some ownership and try to help assist them in what they're trying to do. And so it's a struggle. And so we get calls constantly and we're trying to build it up, but it's a struggle when you don't have the staffing and then you don't have the dollars to pay more people to come in to do the work. So, you know, I applaud with what you're trying to do and I understand what the sponsor is saying, but I try to make it where the community plays a role in building up their community. And so it's just not a solo act. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Alderwoman Boyd. If there's anyone else, any of the other aldermen care to speak? No one else. Alderwoman Rice is still on here. Alderwoman Rice, do you have anything? Alderwoman Ingracia.
No, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, but I really appreciate the conversation and the potential for an action plan moving forward. I think, you know, if we can get more native plants into some of these lots, I think flowers would be lovely, Alderwoman Davis, and ways to have other plantings there that aren't going to grow and aren't going to be a danger to the community. So looking forward to an action plan. Thanks.
Alderwoman Ingracia, you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let's see. So Alderman Todd, here's what I'd like to try to do, if that's all right. Why don't we try to get provide an opportunity for Ms. Costello to contact, I guess, forestry and Ms. I'm sorry, how does she pronounce it?
Ginn.
Ginn. Laura Ginn. If we could perhaps have them at our next meeting, and we will provide you an opportunity to show us, you know, step by step, kind of triage the properties. These are being taken care of. These we know we have a problem with. These we have a plan for already, and then give us an idea what those costs might be, and then we can either turn that over to Ways and Means, or we can, I'm not sure how we handle this with the fiscal note. We might have to ask our attorney about it or something if we're passing legislation.
When is your next meeting?
Well, our next meeting is actually going to be, I believe, next Wednesday. How long does it take you to get this?
A couple of months.
Okay, so this is for when we get back in session then in the fall, what you're asking for. Okay, is that all right with you, Alderman Todd? I think
it's certainly okay. And first, let me thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also the Honorable Committee and the Honorable Marlene Davis. Those flowers certainly would look beautiful. They sound less expensive. And to the rest of the committee, anything you come up with it's not a solo type thing. It's us in the city that is trying to make our city more beautiful, as well as with those flowers, they'll look more beautiful, they'll save money, and then it would help the mental health and the safety of our city. This is what it's all about. And so thank you very much, and for your patience too.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman, you have a second bill before us now. I believe it's Board Bill number 39.
I will be quick with this. Board Bill number 39 also deals with LRA is similar to the 6-month fee that we pay, that the building division can charge, and the other people have an opportunity if they want to submit it. If a building is condemned, then the other people have a choice of whether they want to assess a $400 fee on LRA property or not. And the reason, but they don't have the money. Again, it's a money. It's a way to get those buildings boarded up, also to make those buildings safe, because I've lived next door to a vacant building, and some of my constituents have called me when one of them called me, she had to take her loved one to the hospital. Person living in a vacant building went in and robbed him. Another one, vacant building was next door to several of my constituents. They were selling drugs and fire and other activities. And so but the money, and so it would, again, this would have LRA to remind LRA, once they get the resources, that we expect LRA to not only be a good neighbor, since they are public entity that takes property, we expect them to set an example of how the houses that they took from that the residents lost due to taxes, how property is supposed to be maintained. My position is that we as city leaders have to set an example, and also the agencies that we collaborate with and work with on a daily basis that do business with us, as high level of business as LRA does with the city. It's certainly, we are partners. And so this will be in case I know Laura cooperate because we worked together for many years, but in case we ever get somebody who don't want to work with us and they have the money, we will have the power to start finding them and making them do it. So this is not today. Again, neither one of these bills is I knew they weren't going to go into effect right away. But we will, I do expect that we will continue to change and upgrade as we go along, as we do in every other aspect of our lives.
All right, Alderman, just for clarification, I'm sorry, it references an ordinance. I presume this fee that you're talking about, so as I read it, the idea is to increase the vacant building fee from $200 to $400 charged semi-annually. And I believe, Alderman, that is not for LRA property. I believe that is for privately held property.
But this will continue to be for privately held property. But in addition, when LRA gets some money, it will include LRA too. So it'll be both. Currently only private, it will increase the fine from $200 to $400 for private people right now. And when LRA gets some money, they will be included. They were excluded in the past.
So
I'm asking that the current $200 be increased to $400. Because I got some people who are just sitting on property and they won't do anything with it because they're trying to wait, and they even asked me when is the value going up in this area so we can, and so they're holding that property. So if they're in violation and the property get condemned and the building commission, and then they don't do anything, then the other person would be able to make them.
So here's what I'd like to suggest, Alderman. I think there's some real opportunity to do a dramatic improvement in this area. Let me kind of make a couple suggestions. When we charge this fee to LRA, that's kind of like charging a fee to ourselves. And LRA only owns property when nobody else wants it. What you're wanting to do with this, which is a good idea, and I think there's a real improvement to this, real opportunity to improve things here, is you're wanting to increase the holding costs for speculation.
Exactly.
And there is, I think, a lot of opportunity for us to work. Now, here's the challenge that we have, and this is why we need to slow down. We need to get the building commissioner involved, probably Ms. Ginn again, to understand this a little bit better. And then we probably need somebody from the city councilor's office. The challenge we have, we need to quantify this and be able to demonstrate what our costs are. We have, we're subject to Hancock, which means that if we can go ahead and charge fees for services or legitimate services, but if our fees are deemed to be a tax, then all of a sudden, which is what can happen if we don't have a logical basis for to assess the fee. And so we're going to need to do that. And there is a theory in economics called social cost, where in theory, you can go ahead and charge more than what you're actually costing, because you can argue that perhaps the vacant building is costing more than just cutting the grass. It's actually deterring or hurting the values of the property around it. And therefore, there's an additional social cost. I don't know if that's ever been made an argument, but it's something that's probably worth researching. And if we did it that way, we can probably begin thinking about coming up with different formulas for assessing this fee. So you might be able to go ahead and begin assessing fees based on square footage instead of just vacant buildings, or perhaps on the size of the lot. But whatever we're going to do, we're going to have to justify why or how we're getting those fees. And I don't know, it's been a number of years ago that we established a $200 fee. But I would agree that anything we can do to increase holding costs would be good. The question is what rationale can we demonstrate so that it's not necessarily deemed a tax, that it's truly a fee? Am I making myself clear?
It's a much better idea than I'm presenting. So you're making yourself very clear to me. So I appreciate you, and I would appreciate all of the members, because this affects the whole city, to have their input and this become not an individual, my plan, but a plan that is beneficial for the whole for the whole city.
In a way, what we're trying to do, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase holding costs to force people to either fix up their buildings or get it to LRA. And we have to be very careful. If we get too much property over LRA, then it becomes our responsibility. So we want to be careful about increasing this fee, but we'd like to get these people to go ahead and do something with that property more quickly. And so we call that you drive up the cost of speculation, or their holding costs.
Exactly, and that's the whole thing I'm trying to do, is to they could easily sell the property, but they're speculators and they are holding this property until they can get as much as they can and sell. And what some of them have told me and tried to get me in on it was that, look, we could hold about 5 pieces of property on this block, and we could really make a lot of money together. So I'm just telling you, they came to me, that was a proposal that came to me. I told them I'm not interested, but the point is that I know this is going on, and I've seen it in other parts of our ward. So we're trying, so that the whole idea of the bill is to not give LRA any more property, but to make the owners of property, speculators, sell their property at a reasonable cost, and not drive everybody else not drive residents out of the city, and also endanger residents and lower residents' property value, and while they wait to see if they can make a huge a windfall profit. So that's the whole idea of it.
Okay, so here's what I think needs to happen on this, Alderman. What we need to do is we need to get Frank Oswald from the building division to come in, and he's going to need to work with probably one of the financial analysts over at SLDC, so that we can go ahead and get a begin understanding the costs associated, so that it becomes a fee as opposed to a tax. And then we need to, have Laura involved. And I don't know what Laura, Ms. Gint, is it Gint? I'm not really sure what she's done in this area as well. So here again, we're going to have to do a little bit of work in the background before we, have this, take any action on that. is there somebody from the administration or who, Ms. Costello, could you have Ms. Ginn contact me and maybe we can make her the point person on this, and we can get her to coordinate the next meeting. If she can call me, I'll tell her what needs to get done.
Okay, I will.
Okay. All right. Why don't we go through, if there's, as long as we're here, provide other people the opportunity to talk on this. Alderwoman Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is something that we explored maybe 20 years ago. And unfortunately, what happens is we start a process and then we get busy and get detoured to something else. So what I want to suggest that we add to this as we're preparing to look at how to improve is to add the stabilization part to this. So we have stabilization laws that we could use more stringently in these communities to actually take properties that are a nuisance. And I don't think we have educated our residents and neighborhood associations well enough on how to do that on their behalf, because it has to be them doing it, not the city. I know, I guess it was about maybe 12 years ago, 14 years ago, we had a new home that had been built in Jeff Vanderloo. But what we didn't know was that it was a drug dealer building it. And we had all kinds of problems. And we used the nuisance law to take the building away from him. So you can add that to the process, because a nuisance property, if it's only one that's bringing down a whole neighborhood, let's put that in the mix as well to look at that process. Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Hubbard, any questions? Alderman Kotar. Oh, here, Alderman Hubbard just popped.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Kotar.
No questions.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Laura Costello, if you don't mind. I have some confusion regarding the mowing you were discussing earlier. That when you were talking about the vacant buildings that have, or the vacant properties that have dangerous buildings on them, and forestry, you indicated that forestry is unwilling to mow those.
Correct.
Who mows those?
The LRA, and then forestry helps us out. The LRA.
Does the LRA have its own mowing crew?
Yes.
So the LRA mowing crew mows the vacant buildings that are dangerous.
Correct.
And then so the LRA has its own mowing staff?
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, Laura. I was trying to understand how that works. Is there, and the reason, and forestry mows the other ones, presumably because it's less, they have bigger equipment, they can do.
They use the big equipment. Yes, they use the big equipment.
Got it. Okay, I was confused about that earlier. How many people are on the LRA mow staff?
8.
Okay.
On the LRA, I'm sorry, did you say maintenance?
Yes.
8.
Okay. That's all I have. I was just looking for some clarity on that, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask those questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Laura, for answering.
Thank you, Alderman.
I'll say this too. I mean, I know you do as much as you can with what little resources we have, and you know, it's often we take our frustration out on you, and I apologize for being a part of that. I know you're underfunded.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Alderman Oldenburg.
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Alderwoman Boyd.
No questions.
Okay, how about non-committee members? Looks like Alderwoman Ingracia, you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Alderwoman Rice?
No questions at the moment. I just want to thank Alderman Todd for bringing this up. And I know that the Vacancy Collaborative has been working on some of these issues, and I'm glad that the conversation is moving forward. We get lots of questions all around the city on these things. So yeah, thanks for doing this work. Okay,
Alderman, if you're satisfied that we're trying to make some progress, these things are very, very slow. Where is Alderman Todd at? I can't see him on here anymore. Did he drop off? Does anybody see Alderman Todd on here? Okay, I guess we're going to hold this bill one way or the other then. I'm sorry.
I think he jumped off to go to another
another meeting.
Yeah, he has to be.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I happen to notice that we have Alderwoman Clark Hubbard on here as well. I'm sorry, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Have you been on here before and I haven't seen you?
That's okay, Mr. Chairman. And no, I don't have any questions or comments. Thank you.
I apologize. I'm not very good.
That's okay.
Okay, well, that concludes Alderman Todd's bills. We still have Alderwoman Davis's bill. Alderwoman Davis, you care to discuss your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where am I at here? Is it okay? Because I jumped over to rules and came back too. I'm on board bill. Is it 60? Trying to find it again.
32.
32. Okay, that was over there. 32. So board bill 32 is 1800 through 1808 Washington Avenue, and it is a development plan for 120,000 square foot building, and they have asked for some tax abatement. I'm only following the financial analysis that was provided by SLDC. I never promised anybody anything. So what I'd like to do is ask, is it Zach or Mark that's available for this one?
It's Zach Wilson, and we got John Ferry that ran the model. He's on the line.
Okay.
Too.
So why don't you go ahead and just give us some particulars on it, and because we have it's layered on the tax abatement. Go right ahead.
John, do you want to speak first on the model, or?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
can.
Yes,
sir.
Okay. Yeah. So if you guys have the report that I ran in front of you on this project, so the long and short of it is that it scores 3.5 out of 5, so it gets an approval from the model to go forward. That is at an amount of tax abatement at 90% for the first 5 years and 85% for the second 5 years, for 10 years total. The project is projected to generate about $260,000 to the city over the first 10 years of its life, and then about $640,000 over the first 20 years of its life.
Excuse me, Mr. Ferry, do you have the ability to share screens and show these presentations, or should we?
I don't know.
Do we? Are those presentations out on the Google Drive, or?
They were.
No.
Yeah, Zach had put together a PowerPoint for this. I don't know if he had put it up or not.
I emailed them to everybody Monday, the PowerPoint.
Do you have the ability to put that up, or should we be trying to
take a
find our own
second.
boxes?
That might be the problem.
Me finding stuff in my inbox on the run is.
Chairman, if you like, I can email it to the committee.
Thank you, Sharita.
You're welcome.
Can you guys, I think I'm trying to share. Can you guys see that?
We can see it.
Go ahead and email it to us anyway, though, would you? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
So anyway, so as you can see, the graph at the top here shows that the project will, once the abatement wears off, it sort of catches up to what the neighborhood average is for projects, for properties, I should say, in this part of the city that are of the same sort of type and use. It is a historic building, which is why the model sort of the goal of historic buildings is just to get up to that neighborhood average line, because we try to prioritize the salvaging of historic buildings. So that is why normally if this was like a new project or something, you would need to see that yellow line touch and exceed that orange line there, which is the sustainable revenue line for this property. But in this case, it's considered passing at the level that it's at. The reason it tails off at the end is because we try to be extremely conservative in projections sort of beyond the 20-year mark, where we only do a 1% average annual growth rate, even though the trend lines grow at about 2.7% based on historic cost inflation to the city. So anyway, like I said, the project generates about $260,000 over 10 years to the city, $640,000 over 20 years. The school district would get about $27,000 over 10 years and about $550,000 over 20 years. And the project's rate of return, even with the incentive, is, from what we can see, still at the lower end of the range. It was explained in the LCRA meeting that the property developer owns the property either next door or across the street, and so therefore they see sort of ancillary benefits to developing this property that are separate from the actual rate of return itself on the project. It is a $15.7 million project, and I guess that sort of sums up my presentation on it. So if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
We also have David Sweeney and Doug Rasmussen from the developer side giving questions on them. It's basically 72 residential units will be produced at this building. 2.2 they acquired, 2.2 million they required the property for, and it'll be a $13.5 million investment.
Do we have any pictures of the building itself, or I'm trying to find it on Google? What was the address?
1800 Washington. I can give you all a reference. So the building has tire mark sign on it, a red tire mark sign on it. Am I saying the right building?
No, it's 1808 Washington.
Yeah, okay, no, then that's not tire mark building.
It's Mulligan.
Okay.
Right now.
I got a couple of projects going on over there, and I'm trying to make sure I don't give you the wrong one.
This is a print company currently.
Okay.
So if you know where the corner of 18th and Washington.
See if we can.
Yeah.
Which building?
You know
is
where the little white, what's the name of that White Tower restaurant or something?
Is this
on the corner of 18th and Washington? Olive or whatever it is. Does anybody have a picture?
Can you, what is it?
There we are. There we are.
I can share the screen, but I can't share it.
got it up. Which building is it?
We're looking at it.
Okay.
Which building is it?
We have it.
Keep going east.
Yeah, keep going east. Is that one right there?
This one here?
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it right there.
No.
No, he passed it. That's the current building they did. That's the Monogram building.
This is the Monogram building. And then on the opposite corner, what used to be CPI.
This building here?
Yeah.
That's it right there. There you are. Now, David, one of the things that I was excited about this project is that because of the previous investment there, with the grocery store on the first floor, all of that, bringing in more residents there is really going to be a plus. And they have all the amenities. They have a lot of amenities right there close. In the 1900 block of Washington, we have a number of new developments down there, a number of new small businesses that have moved in. And so that area is beginning to have a different effect instead of a lot of tall vacant buildings. And we're going to have some affordable units in here as well.
Where's the parking at for the building?
First floor. It'll be interior, the first floor and the basement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's going to be nice.
Will there be first floor retail along Washington or?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
No.
So everything's going to be, okay.
They've got a lot of retail around them.
One of the things that we did some stuff, live workspaces when it was tough to do retail at the beginning. So something to consider, I guess. But let's go ahead and run it through the committee. Let's see, Alderwoman Hubbard, do you have any questions? Alderwoman Hubbard. Okay, Alderman Kotar, any questions?
Yeah, I may have missed this. What was this building originally? Is it a printing company?
And still, it currently is at this time as well, Alderman.
It still is at the moment. Yeah, printing company.
Okay, cool. Looks like a great project. Nothing further. Thanks, guys.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I understand this correctly, this is a $15.7 million project, and St. Louis schools are projected to get 22,000 out of it.
Oh no, 220.
Jonathan, if you could. Right. If I understand correctly, the city is projected to have a fiscal advantage of 200,000, and the school district is, according to your report here, 22,000 over 10 years.
Yeah, it's 27,000 over the first 10 years, and then 550,000 over 20 years.
That's for the school district?
Correct.
I'm looking at the report here. It looks like, sorry, Jonathan, it looks like 22 and 94, but I may be reading those red numbers incorrectly here in the fiscal benefit.
Oh yeah, that's the fiscal advantage to the school district over the neighborhood average. That's the number you're looking at down in the red. The fiscal benefit, that's the number a couple lines above that where it says fiscal benefit to school district.
Okay, so over the first 10 years, the St. Louis school district should receive 27,000. It just seems so low for a $15 million project that our schools would get such pennies compared, of the whole of a project that large. Am I incorrect in thinking that, or?
Well, I mean, it's I'll let David or whoever that is answer.
I was just going to maybe throw in there, Alderwoman Spencer. I and John, please back this up, but I'm showing the base taxes on the building are 272,000. I don't have a distribution of what that is for the schools, but that may be part of so that would still be in place.
Right. That's true. Sorry, that level there does say benefit over the base. So that 27,000 is new revenue to the school district. That's correct.
It's above what
so
they
that
would
200. Right. That's above what they would normally get.
Right.
That's new revenue.
And it's all based on the school district assessment for themselves. And so we follow their lead. We don't set anything for them.
Okay. And the developer here, I apologize if I missed that. Who's the developer on the project?
This is Dave Sweeney. It's Michael. It's the same developer that did the project to the east, the Monogram building. It's Michael Knight and his partners, and they're based in Kansas City. They did the Commerce Tower in Kansas City, and they're looking to do this project and several other ones in the region.
Right.
Got it. Okay. And Jonathan, you were mentioning the yellow, the yellow line, the projection here, the revenue during the incentive period being lower than normal. Can you explain that again? I was misunderstanding a little bit of what you're saying there.
Yeah, it just that, so the blue line and the orange line, the blue line is essentially what we project to be sort of the neighborhood average for buildings of the same type and use in this part of the city, based on the size of the land area being utilized. And then the orange line is the sustainable number that we'd like to hit on projects. So on a historic property, this is going to be certified historic, the model tries to aim at getting the project up to that blue line because we recognize that you can't just alter the structure or the property necessarily to get the level of density that you might want. So so the goal is to be able to get up to that blue line, and then and so it does hit that number. The reason why it looks like it trails off is because we are extremely conservative in terms of the latter years in terms of growth of revenue, where we projected only 1%. If it hits normal inflation levels, you would expect it to continue along with that blue line. So, but we look at essentially the first, as far as the model scoring goes, we look at essentially the first 20 years on that, when putting that together. So
the issue is also the gray line is the current revenue coming into the city. It will continue that. And also downtown West has a much higher bar than all the other neighborhoods in the city. So that's why that blue line is higher than most other parts of the city.
That's true. Yeah, it is one of the higher bars in the city.
So, Jonathan, are you worried at all? I mean, looking at a yellow line that falls below the average for the neighborhood, incentivizing a project that seems to sort of bring the average down, certainly has an alarming front end. Does that happen?
Well, I mean, if you look at the gray bar today, the gray bar is that just below that dotted line at the bottom. And by the way, that dotted line, that's the citywide average revenue for a project for a property this size. So you can see how this project and this area outperforms sort of the city average by quite a substantial amount. But anyway, if you look at what the gray line is right now, it is just above the citywide average. So this property right now today is significantly underperforming what this area is performing at. So again, the fact that it is a historic building, likelihood of trying to restart on the property, I would think would be very low, with some new different type of structure altogether. And so to me, it makes sense that if you can get a property that is currently drastically underperforming the neighborhood average, and then within 10 years get it up to the neighborhood average, that seems to make sense to me. And again, that's the reason why it scores sort of like at the lowest level of acceptability in terms of our scoring. If it was far in excess of that blue line, it would be a score closer to 4 or 5, but as it stands, it gets 3.5 out of 5.
Another factor is the neighborhood average includes a lot of buildings that are much taller than this. And obviously, because it's a historic building, it can't get any taller. Therefore, it follows along about the neighborhood average. So I think we couldn't anticipate that this historic building has any potential to go much beyond what the neighborhood average would be.
I appreciate that. Something I had noticed. So thank you, Dale, for that. I think that's important to note. Is there any affordable housing units that are part of this project?
This is Dave Sweeney. They're going to do smaller sizes than typical to downtown. So to get the price point down, they're not getting any low income tax credits or anything of that nature. So, but they are very cognizant of the downtown market and are going to really focus on getting the rents basic as they can, or to make it more accessible to folks.
Is there any commitment to have any units that fall, that would, fall in the definition of affordable housing? I'm just curious, David, if there's any commitment on the end of the, trying.
No, there's not. I mean, other than that's their plan, and that's kind of the design of the units, just based on size.
Okay.
Yeah, I can weigh in there a little bit, Alderwoman Spencer. There's 44 studios planned, and currently they're driving those rents, trying to drive those rents about $900 a month.
On the studios.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Doug.
And then real quick to your school district. So I had a chance to look that up, and the school district gets 61% of that $272,000 in base taxes. So that's the millage rate, their percentage. So it'd be about $167,000 of the taxes that are already there.
And that's paid on an annual basis?
Correct.
Over the 10 years. Sorry, that's the annual basis? You're looking at the annual numbers. I didn't understand if you were looking at the 10-year value increment. You're looking at the overall tax liability on an annual basis.
Yeah, so John mentioned the net new taxes that would go to the school, which was the $27,000, and I was just referring to the existing taxes that are already on the property, which the total is $272,000, and $166,000 roughly of that currently goes to the school district.
Okay, it looks like that $29,000 a year paid. Seems like there's a disconnect there. According to the assessor site, the address is paying $29,000 a year currently.
Oh.
Okay.
I'm looking at
perhaps, yeah. I have something different. But...
Washington, and according to the St. Louis City West assessor site, we've got $28,972,000 paid in 2018.
Yeah, okay. That I can confirm that what Alderwoman Spencer is saying is what I modeled out. It's the $28,972 is the current tax that's being generated by the property.
Okay, thank you. I must have looked at the wrong address. Thanks, guys.
Sure. And then just lastly, the MVA category B. So the proposal here is to do 10 years of tax abatement, 9-year, first 5 years at what are we looking at here? First 5 years at 90%, and the following 5 years at 85%. Is this what's recommended by with the new plan that we have? Was this the recommended tax abatement recommended by SLDC?
Since the projects are for $1 million, it goes to John's model, and that's what John's model recommends.
Yeah, I think the original request was maybe 10 years at 100%, and this was the maximum amount we could support and still get a passing score on the project, was the 5 years at 90 and 5 years at 85.
Got it. Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Jonathan, Dave, and Doug, and thanks, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to ask questions.
All right. We have, I'm sorry, I put down my sheet here. I believe it's Alderman Oldenburg's next. I closed my.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Alderwoman, congratulations on facilitating this project. I'm pretty familiar with the Commerce Tower deal that was done in Kansas City and with the sponsorship team here. And we, as a broad statement, we welcome this team and this team of risk takers coming to St. Louis. They can execute. So. And I know that's an important kind of busted tooth along Washington Avenue there to kind of make connections. So first and foremost, congratulations, and look forward to this project coming along. I just had one maybe technical question in the sources and uses, Jonathan, and the capital stack assumptions, given this is a qualified rehabilitation expense vis-a-vis the historic tax credit program. What price per credit are you assuming there for the federal and the state credits? You've got just under a 2.1 million for the federal and a 2.4 million for the states.
So to clarify your question, what
or did that come from the developers?
Credits or
budget.
That came from
Yeah.
the developers.
It came from the developer's budget. Okay, so you just plugged it in. I got it. Okay.
Yep.
No further questions.
See, who did I miss? Oh, Alderwoman Boyd.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to compliment Alderwoman Davis because Washington has been like empty for a while. So she's bringing life back to us. So I appreciate that. And so I'm trying to learn as I go to get insight. And so thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. If there's no other questions, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my, got a couple things going on out here. If there's no other questions, the chair will entertain a motion for a due pass.
I move that we adopt Board Bill 32 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll.
Moved second. No objection to the previous roll. We'll consider this board bill is heard and passed out of committee with a due pass recommendation. We are scheduled to come back. I know I have a Cortex bill that I need to bring back. I don't believe there'll be enough work done on any of Alderman Todd's bills to bring those back this session. I think I don't know if it's next week or the week after. I got too many things going on here. We will have at our next meeting, our guest speaker, our special speaker, we'll have an update on our affordable housing strategy that's being done. We are in the process of gathering a lot of data on that, and we had hoped to begin rolling it out and inviting people in. Collaboration and consensus building is going to be very, very important when we start setting up these policies. And our hope was to have a steering committee that would be fairly representative of the general public. We're very fortunate Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard has agreed to serve on that. And I think we've been inviting her to several meetings. Alderman Hubbard, have you been to a couple of the meetings that we've been at? I'm trying to remember. If
I haven't, Mr. Chairman, but I definitely would love to attend.
Okay, well, Alderman Hubbard will be representing not only the Northside Alder people, but also representing the board as a chairman of the Neighborhood Development Committee. So our hope would be is that we would reach out to the community. There are a lot of issues in affordable housing that make it a lot more complicated than what most people think it is. And we hope to begin trying to build some sort of consensus as we go forward on, what success looks like in our neighborhoods. Because right now, you run into situations that I think we're all opposed to segregation, but how do you go ahead and end segregation? Do you move white people into predominantly African-American neighborhoods? Well, that's called gentrification. If you move African-Americans out of those neighborhoods and into white neighborhoods, that's called displacement. What's the appropriate composition of a neighborhood? What should success look like? And how do our policies impact that? And how active should we be in reintegrating neighborhoods and so forth. So there's a lot of very complicated issues. It's going to require a lot of consensus building and, quite frankly, a lot of time listening to other people's opinions. And we're really wanting to do that mostly in person. I mean, these video meetings are fine. They save us all time and everything, but it's not the same as meeting with somebody and seeing their body language and, hearing them and so forth. So the pandemic is really slowing us down as far as how our outreach goes. But in any event, we hope to at least have an update on some of the data collection and some of the best practices perhaps, but they'll be at our next meeting. So with that, why don't we go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. Thanks everybody for your time today. Look forward to seeing you. I think it's in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.